Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar. A webinar that will talk about anthropometric and strength data of children for use in standardization. My name is Els, and I will be moderating this webinar in the background today. I would just like to remind you that all the attendees are muted by default, so you're not able to ask your questions out loud right away, but we do invite you to use the Q&A panel that is available for you. So on the next slide, you can see a little print screen showing you the Q&A panel of the Zoom webinar. That is the part that you can use for entering your question. The chat is by default disabled for all attendees, so we kindly ask you to use Q&A. We will have, after each presentation, a small stop to look into the questions raised, and we intend in any case to reply as many questions as possible. Should your question remain unreplied during this session, we promise you to make a Q&A report available that will be shared with you as soon as possible. The presentation of today, together with a complete recording of the webinar, will also be made available via the website. You will receive an email notification when that is available. So without further ado, let's jump into the agenda of this webinar, because we have quite a tight agenda. First of all, my colleague Jennifer will introduce to you the European standardization organizations, us and Senelec, and also a bit on ETSI. We will go then through the background of the project and explain you also why it is so important to have these anthropometric data available. Then we jump into the details of the project itself with a detailed explanation and description of the project, finalizing with guidelines for the correct application of the data. As I said, each speaker will take a moment to look at the questions. Is there time left at the end of the presentations? We will have a look through the complete question set and reply as many questions as possible. So let's go to the next slide, because the time is to introduce you the first speaker. It's my colleague Jennifer Agbona, who is Project Manager Energy and Living at Senelec in Brussels. So please, Jennifer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Els, for that warm introduction. I would like to start by saying that we have a fully booked webinar with almost 300 registered participants for this webinar. This number is very impressive, especially for our very first webinar on this topic, and it clearly goes to show the importance and the interest of today's topic in our community. Before we dive into the core of today's webinar, let's have a quick introduction to Senelec and what we do. So Senelec are two public organizations with a common secretariat and a common system of rules to serve the interest of our members. Our members are the 27 member states of the European Union, together with the United Kingdom, North Macedonia, Serbia, and Turkey. We also have as members 3 countries from the EFTA countries, such as Iceland, Switzerland, and Norway. The decision-making rules within our organization is based on the size of the population. Here's to give you an overview of our members. So for the member state France, our member would be AFNOR, and for the member states Germany, our member will be DIN and DK, just to give you an idea. We also have a concept of partnership with European organizations. Since Senelec are 2 different organizations, it would only make sense for them to have each of their partners organizations. So we have partner organizations such as ANEC, which has been involved in this project and is still very much involved in this project. We also have liaisons organizations and European agencies such as Frontex and the European Commission Joint Research Center. So let's look at what we do without really going into details. As my colleague has mentioned, you will receive, the materials of this webinar will be made available online, and you can click on them you can click on these links in the presentation to have more details on what we do. Sen and Senelec develop several deliverables, but our main prime deliverable by excellence is European standards. We also develop technical specifications, technical reports, and workshop agreements. For the sake of today's webinar, I'm just going to give a few bullet points on what a technical report is. A technical report is an informative document that provides technical content of a standardization work. It may include, for example, data obtained from a survey, laboratory tests, or data on the work in other organizations. It is adopted at a simple majority and is made available to our members. There is no time limit specified for its lifetime, but our experts are recommended to regularly update their technical report in order to ensure that the information in this document remains valid. Now let's look at the background on this project. In the past several years, SEN will receive requests from the European Commission, which we refer to as a mandate. So we will receive a mandate from the European Commission to develop standardization projects on child care articles, on toys, or any type of products that are designated for children or used by children. However, in order to develop products for children, there is a need for precise measurement of the end users of these products, because the use of incorrect or out-of-date data may cause a risk for these users, such as entrapment and strangulation. And also considering that children's dimension, so their bodies and their sizes have changed in the past 30 years, and that there was no European-wide collection of anthropometric data specifically for children, it was needed to have a set of coherent and correct anthropometric data for children in order to ensure safe requirements for these users. When we talk about the collection of anthropometric data, we are talking about measurements, research surveys, which consequently meant that we needed funding. So in this context, SEN addressed a letter to the European Commission informing them of their intention to carry out a study to update the anthropometric data of children between the year of 0 and 14 years. And the European Commission, of course, showed interest to fund this project. Afterwards, a workshop took place with stakeholders to discuss the aim, the scope, and the methodology of this project. The workshop gathered more than 20 experts from different national standardization body, and fast forward, the SEN addressed a formal request to the Commission, and the request was accepted. Now the project is being funded by the European Commission and EFTA. The objective of this project is to identify, acquire, and measure the anthropometric data of children that were needed by the relevant stakeholders, and to develop guidance for these stakeholders and for standard writers on the correct application of anthropometric data. And the outcome was that there will be a publication of these information in a SEN technical report. The project is being carried out by our SEN TC 122 on ergonomics, especially, in particular, its working group 1 on anthropometry, and the leadership is headed by Dean. There were also other SEN committees that were involved in this project, in interviews, in workshop, or in discussions within the working group, and they're very much still involved in this project. I wouldn't go through them. You have them right in front of you. So during the workshop, it was decided to split the project into 2 phases. I will go into details into the next few slides. This will be further developed by one of the speakers in the webinar. So the first phase of the project was signed in 2014 between SEND, European Commission, and EFTA. And the first phase was to research on the existence and the availability of anthropometric data for children in Europe, and to research on the needs of the relevant stakeholders on anthropometric data. That's to say, where we needed more anthropometric data in the industry. And the outcome of these two tasks led to a mapping of what existed, so the data that they found, and where there is still a need for data. And the outcome of this led to the publication of a SEND technical report 17698 on demands and availability of anthropometric and strength data of children in Europe. So the first phase would then form the second, will form the basis for the ongoing second project. The second phase of the project was signed in 2019, and here it was to acquire the relevant anthropometric and strength data of children in Europe, and to elaborate guidelines on how to correctly apply anthropometric and strength data of children. Like I said, the speaker in the webinar will go more in details on the outcome of these projects. So the second phase, the intention is that this second phase would lead to the publication of two additional technical reports, one containing the statistical, anthropometric, and strength data, and the second one will then be on the application of anthropometric and strength data. So now that you have an idea or an overview of the background, I would then give the floor to the next speaker to tell you more on the importance of having anthropometric and strength data.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. And indeed, the timing is short. So I would like to invite you, Jennifer, to have a look at the Q&A. There's nothing so far, but people might be thinking about entering questions right now. So please have a look and write your answers if possible. I would like to continue then with the next speaker, because we have the pleasure to have with us today Mr. Levent Kakelaar, who is working at FIRA International, and he is also an expert of Working Group 1 of TC 122, which is working specifically, of course, on anthropometry. Please, Mr. Kakelaar, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Els. Good afternoon, everybody. Could I have the next slide, Jennifer? Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to talk to you briefly about the importance of anthropometric and strength data. Firstly, let's look at who are likely to benefit from such data. These will be the people initially, well, firstly, product designers who will designing and creating products for children. And secondly, the standard makers and developers who are writing standards to make products safe for children. And finally, the regulators and enforcers of legislation is going to check the products are safe. They will also benefit from using such anthropometric. Okay, reliable and reliable anthropometric data are not only the building blocks for the development of safe ergonomic products, which will enhance the experience of the user and the comfort of the user, but also such data are essential tools for specifying safety requirements for product standards and devising test methods to verify such requirements, and also not forgetting the risk assessment, which will be, this anthropometric data will be extremely useful carrying out risk assessments for children's products. On the next slide, please. Okay, use of anthropometric data will ensure that children's products are fit for purpose, they're designed for, they will match the sizes of children, they are safe, they are easy to use and efficient in their operation, will improve the development of children, health and well-being of children as well, which are unlike the pictures you see here. The first picture you see, the first picture you see here on the left is a mismatching sizes of furniture to size of a child. So that clearly is not going to help the child to grow in a good way. Second picture on the right is a unsuitable or the product that is not fit for purpose for the task the child is carrying out. Okay, the next slide, please. If you now look at the specific applications or use of anthropometric data in trying to prevent entrapment and compression risk for childs, here we look at looking at holes and gaps in products. The picture on the right shows a child getting his finger caught in a hole in a part of a furniture. In fact, it is a school chair. And the picture on the left shows a child getting the finger caught in a toy. If you look at the next picture, slide please. The other issues, the risks that the children will have is getting their heads stuck between railings and banisters, which is quite common, or getting caught between moving parts of furniture or of any other product. And use of anthropometric data will help to prevent such things. Next slide, please. So, having identified what body part is going to be a child, how can we define safe gaps? As an example, these are either going to be smaller than the body part we're concerned with, so that the child cannot access the danger, or it's got to be larger than the body size so that the child is able to get away from the risk of injury or the danger. Next slide, please. The other factor we're going to look at is use of controls. By designing controls of a product which are beyond the capabilities of a child or the intended group of children, we can prevent children having access to danger. For example, in a buckle of a car seat, it is so difficult for a child to push it so that they cannot get out of the car seat. So that is intentional, so they can't get away. In other circumstances, where we intend children to get away from danger, control mechanisms should be such that should be within the capabilities of child operating it or getting away from danger. An example here would be a toy box with a lid. If the child gets trapped in it, the lid should be so light or easy to push within the capability of a child so the child can get out of the toy box. So get away from the risk. That is one way of using anthropometric data. The next slide, please. So by using appropriate data, it should be possible to design furniture matching the sizes of the children and allowing them to adopt very comfortable postures, hence avoiding back pain, not only at the time, but also in their future life when they're adults. Similarly, a design and manufacture of a correctly sized clothing, such as a shoe that would fit well the child, it will improve the user experience, but also help the child physical development. Finally, in the last slide, next slide, please. I'd like to finally conclude that appropriate anthropometric and strength data will help the designers to produce safe, comfortable products, which are joy to use by children. But also they will help the standard makers, developers, to determine what the relevant safety requirements are and how requirements are met within a safety product. Thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Levent, for this interesting overview. A few questions came in, but they were already replied by the other speakers. So thanks a
Okay,
lot for that.
thank you, colleagues.
Others might come in still, so
Okay.
please have a look in the coming minutes. If you can just have the next slide with the next speaker, because we have the pleasure as well to have Mrs. Sandra Alemani in our speakers panel today. She's a lead researcher on anthropometry working at the Institute of Biomechanics in Valencia. So please, Sandra, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Els, for your introduction. So now I'm going to continue with a description of the project. So please, next. So the project has been conceived in two phases. First one was complete and finished and was focused on the research on demand and availability of anthropometric data of children. The objectives of this phase were first to do a comprehensive review of which are the anthropometric and strength data available for this project. So the idea was not to start measuring, so to start searching first what was done in the past and what is available for the project. So we did several contacts also with researchers and data owners in order to see the possibility of using the data on this project and use it for the application in standardization. So the second objective of the project was to analyze the demands on anthropometric data. So to see which are the list of anthropometric measurements and strengths that are relevant for design, for standardizations, and for different purposes. So we were in contact with experts and professionals that are usually working with children products, and also we consider environments where children interact with. And finally, we did a gap analysis comparing which is available, what is the anthropometric data that we have, and which are the demands, and at the end, what is necessary to cover with the measuring campaign that we designed for this project. The result of this phase one will be included in a technical report number 17698, and it's already published, and I will explain later on in more details which are the contents. So the second phase of the project that is running now, it's in progress, it's divided into sub-projects. First sub-project, it's related to the anthropometric and strength study of children in Europe. This part is led by the Institute of Biomechanics in Valencia, and the objectives of this section is to acquire the existing databases, those that were selected from the phase one that can be useful for the project. Then second objective is to develop the measuring campaign that will be done in two countries. One is Spain, and the second one will be other country in Europe. And later on in the project is also including the processing of the data, the new one that is acquiring the project, but also the data that is coming from available databases. We need to assure a good integration of the data and the analysis to, at the end, obtain statistical tables that will be included in as a result of the project in a new technical report. The second project, it's focused on the guidelines for the applications of anthropometry and strength data. This is this part of the project is led by a consortium coordinated by the University of Kiel, and we have a speaker later on explaining in more detail this section of the project. And finally, the results, it's foreseen to be published in two new technical reports that will include the statistical summaries and all the information obtained on the project and also the guidelines. So now, next slide, please. So now I'm going to do an overview of the results obtained in phase 1 and also what we can find in the technical report. So to cover the first objective, that was the study on the demands, which are the anthropometry required for the design of and standardization of children products. We did an online questionnaire that was distributed among different professional experts, all of them related to children products. And we obtained a high level of participation in these online questionnaires. More than 250 people answered the questionnaire. And in order to complete this kind of the information from the questionnaire, we also did several workshops and individual interviews in order to have more detailed information and more qualitative insights about how to use the data, how to apply it, and which is the format that can we use to deliver the data at the end. And in this case, we have a participation of 20 people in this kind of interviews. Next, please. So the distribution and of experts, the experts participating in the online questionnaires, but also in the workshops were experts mainly from designers, quality expert, standardization, and people working on research, all related with children products. Next, please. And the distribution by sectors that you can see here in this slide covers more or less all the sectors that are focused on children products. 23% of the people were from the clothing and footwear sector, 21% representing the toys industry, 12% the child use and care, 10% playgrounds, 12 educational furnitures, and we have also export, transport, and others. And most of the participants are also, they had also some relationship with technical committee and standardization processes. So they knew very well the requirements of anthropometry needs to progress in standardization. So next, please. In the case of the workshops, we have also we did also a good distributions by sectors, and I would like to remark that we include also a specific version in construction. This is not focused only in children, but buildings, public and also private, are environments that are used by children. So it's important also to consider safety and ergonomic demands coming from these applications. So next, please. So in order to design the questionnaire, we did a comprehensive review of literature, research paper, books, and standards in order to, at the end, have a list of anthropometric measurements that can, of the body, that can be related to children product environments where children interact with, and ask specifically which are the measurements that are relevant or highly relevant for the different products and the different sectors. So next, please. So we have a list of more than 200 body measurements included in the questionnaire. And the results that we obtained from the participants, the results were that show that if we combine measurements that are highly relevant and measurements that are relevant for all the sectors, at the end, we have 232 body measurements to consider in the project, plus 18 body measurements that were not included in the questionnaire and are added or suggested by the participants because they feel that are important for some aspect, for safety or for ergonomics or for something. So at the end, this is one of the elements more challenging in the project, that the list of body measurements that we are managing, including strengths, it's too long. Next, please. So we defined 3 categories of if body measurements. In green color are the category that is highly relevant for a sector. In yellow color, we have the body measurements that are relevant. Are in white, we have the measurements that are not important for a specific product or for a specific sector. So with this coding criteria, so what it is included in the technical report is a list of tables. I have an example in the next slide. So please. This is a list of tables that are relating body measurements and sectors with this classification in categories or relevance and higher relevance. This is an example for the case of the measurements related to the head and face. So you can see here the distributions. This will be also very helpful for the second phase in order to organize the statistical of tables of the data according to different sectors or different applications. So next, please. So what it is also included in the technical report is an anthropometric and strengths dictionary. So it is in the Annex A of the report, and it includes a detailed description of each anthropometric measurements, a picture, and also the relationship with other anthropometry standards. There are standards covering anthropometric body measurements. For example, the ISO 7250 is related to ergonomics applications, and the other ISO 8559 is more related to clothing. We are also working with body measurements that are not described in any standard. So here we have a good review of anthropometric descriptions. And the second aim of the phase 1 was to review the existing databases. And for this purpose, we define an inclusion criteria. First criteria is related to the geographical scope. So we focus the search in studies covering Europe, in particular EU 27, UK, Switzerland, Turkey, Norway, Russia, and Belarus. Also, the year of generation of the database, we only consider the studies done after 2000. And in relation to the demographic aspects, we also consider healthy children. Studies focus on healthy children from 0 to 70 years old and covering both genders. And in terms of sample size, we decided to not to include any limitation here and to consider all the studies, even if they are focused on a small sample size, because at the end, I think to have a reference, it's interesting for the project. And finally, in relation to the measuring protocols, we include both studies done in traditional anthropometry with manual measurements and studies done with 3D body scanning methods. So as a result, we we included finally a list of 159 databases of anthropometry and strength data of the children populations in Europe. This repository, this list is organized and published in the technical report in several tables. This is one example of the information that you can check in the technical report for each database. So you have the code of the database, the study, the name of the title of the study, the name of the database, the year of publication, the year of the surveys, sometimes are different, the year of measurements and the year of publication, the author or the organization in charge of the study, the country, the range of age that is covering, the gender, the sample size, so you can see the relevancy of the study, and more or less a summary of what type of measurements are included, if full body measurements, measuring focus on the hand, in the head, or something. So how can we use this information? So imagine that you are a company that is going of school furniture, and you are going to conceive or design a new chair for students. And here in this picture, you have the main list of body measurements that are important for the ergonomics of the chair, of school chairs. And then you can go to the technical report, and you can search in the list of, in the table of anthropometric databases. So please, next slide. And you can find two studies related to anthropometry in sitting posture. One with the from the Czech Republic, done in 2012, and the other from United Kingdom, done in 2001. So then you have the title and all the references of the study to go later on to the paper and to find the publication. And in one of these publications, you can find, for example, a list of 9 body measurements in sitting postures that can be useful for the design of chairs. In this case, there are statistical tables, including mean, standard deviation, and the results are divided in 3 tables. One covering the age group from 4 to 7 years old, the other from 7 to 11, and the final table from 11 to 15. So maybe it's not perfect, or it's not covering all the list of body measurements, but it's a starting point that can be very useful in the design of a new product. So next, please. So this is what we have obtaining as a result of phase 1 and what is included in the technical report. So we think that this information is useful for designers, but we know also that they have some limitations. One is that the statistical summaries are not always organized in covering the age group that covering the same age group that we have as a target population in our product. So in the case of children, that when we have the growing effect and the variation and significant variation on the anthropometry with the age, so it's important to work with the target age range. And to organize in this way the statistical summaries. Second limitation is that the studies, most of the studies are focused in one specific country, and it's very difficult to combine or to compare results from different countries, because the methodological approach, the definition of the measurements, and the devices used to gather the measurements are different. So there are bias related to the methodologies, to the methodological approach. Next limitation is the lack of data from some specific parts of the body, like, for example, the hands, that is very important, the anthropometry for safety application. And finally, in the case of the strengths, apart from hand grip, there are very limited data and not related to the application and the real use of the children product. So it's necessary to advance in this research. So next, please. So the results of phase 2 were used as a specification to define, results from phase 1 were used as specifications to design the scope of the phase 2. And the objectives, very quick, are acquisition of the relevant existing anthropometric data, the development of the measuring program in 2 countries, the processing and harmonization of the data coming from the different data sources. We also include tasks relating to estimation on one measurements from others, because as you have seen the list of body measurements, it's very long. So we can reduce and optimize the measuring program with this element. And finally, we need to analyze data and obtain the statistical tables. The project phase include also the elaboration of the guidelines that will be explained later on by the last speaker. And yeah, as I mentioned before, all these results will be public into new technical reports. Next, please. So the age range that we are going to cover with a new campaign of body measurements, it's from 0 to 16 years old. And from 0 to 3 years old, we are going to cover around 93 anthropometric measurements and 6 strengths. And then in the age group from 4 to 16, we are going to cover an extended list of measurements, more than 180 and 14 strengths. We have a distribution of the sample size by age group. This is the table that you can see in the slide, and the sample size is different or varies if there are body measurements, head, foot, or if there are strengths. But it's, I think it's a very relevant sample size. And in the case of body measurements, if we are joining boys and girls and all the age group, we are going to measure more than 1,700 children in the project. This in 2 European countries. Next, please. So in the small group from 0 to 2 years old, we are going to use manual anthropometry. It's not possible to scan or to measure in a digital way babies, so we will use manual anthropometry, and we have also designed some specific devices to measure some of the measurements included in the project. Next slide, please. And for the group from 2 to 70 years old, we are going to use mainly 3-body scanning technology. At the end, the list of body measurements is too long, so we can optimize and extract several groups of measurements from different postures. That's the reason why 3D scanning is interesting to optimize the measuring protocol, and also the possibility to, in the future, to reinterrogate the 3D scans to obtain new measurements that are not currently in the list, but maybe in the future can be useful for some application that it's out of the scope today. Also, the possibility to generate dummies or to generate body shapes can be feasible with this kind of data. And 3D scans will be also combined with manual measurements in order to have traceability, tracking of all the process. Next, please. I want to mention also the challenging activity related to the harmonization of the data and the processing of the data, and in the case also of digital measurements, how to obtain the anthropometric measurements from the 3D scans, considering databases that are measured in different projects. So as I mentioned, one in Spain, other will be done in a second country. And we have two existing databases from past studies, one from Spain and the other from Romania, that will be integrated in the European, what we will call the European database of children. So next, please. In the case of strengths, so there are not commercial systems to measure the strengths. Only for Hungary or some specific strengths you can find a device, but in this case we need to measure 14 forces, different forces. And we have designed a workstation especially for this project, including different force sensors and different accessories to perform the force and to gather the force curve and the maximum data. And it includes regulation, because we need to cover very small children from 2 years till existing. So we need to have a regulation in order to perform the gesture and the protocol in a proper way. So next, please. And which is the current status of the project? So at this moment, we finished the setup of the protocols and the methodologies, more or less. We are refining some parts, but more or less this is finished. We did a pilot study in order to validate the protocols and also to check the duration of the sessions and all the things. And we did a comparative analysis of digital anthropometry and traditional anthropometry according to the ISO standard that is also mentioned in the, is also including this type of good practice of protocols. At this moment, we have selected 2 measurement points in Spain, and we are setting up the pipeline of the measuring protocol to be integrated in this case. There are 2 schools, so we are checking that all the devices can be setting up there properly. We have the ethical approval from the Polytechnic University of Valencia for the phase 2. So from that point of view, we are covering properly the ethical issues and also the data protection aspects. So, in particular, we have a DPO, a data protection officer, working for the project to cover these aspects. And now we are waiting for the kickoff of the measuring campaign due to the COVID-19 situation. So we expect to start soon the measurements at the schools. So this is my next, please. This is my last slide. So if we have questions, I can answer now or.
Yes, thank you very much, Sandra, for this extensive overview. I think it was very interesting, and I think the audience thinks the same because many questions came in. Most of them were replied already by our question support team, if I can call them like that. So thank you very much for that. But there are some that still are unreplied. So if it's possible to reply, please go ahead. Time is ticking, so I would like to invite the next speaker already. There is one question, by the way, that came in relation to the fact that the slide on the survey information was not mentioning industry in relation to household appliances. So I think Gert Kuchmeester, who is our next speaker, will cover that. He is project leader on the guidelines for the application of the children data and working at the Kiel University of Applied Sciences. So please, Gert, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and welcome from Kiel, from North Germany. Next, please. We are writing the guidelines for the correct application of anthropometric and strength data, because we have to bring back the data from the scientific work back to the desks of the designers and back to a practical application. And that means that it's a very broad field where all these data can be applicated. And this is the first part of the answer of, to those questions I've read. Next, please. We have a direct impact from the work from our Spanish colleagues and from the work from the anthropometrists from other countries when it comes to safer and comfortable products for children. But, and this was also one question, there is an indirect impact to many situations and environments and products when it comes to products in the child's world. So we expect a safer and economic products for adults in contact with products and procedures in a child's world too. The macro impact of all our work is that we expect less healthcare costs and an economic advantage for EU products on the market. Next, please. The application of the new and renewed and actual data, I want to bring you near to by showing how we are working with dummies when we represent children in an adult or in a children environment. Next, please. For example, when it comes to safety seats, it's in the interest of children and adults that everything is well adapted to the development of anthropometric data. For example, in a safety seat, it's important that you have a close look on actual data concerning the sitting height for the first part of the belt above in this picture. But you have to consider that you have an extreme development of anthropometric data in the region of the belly. As you know, when you have a close look on the development on the streets and how children work and walk and what they eat. Next, please. And it's not only safety, it's comfort too. For example, when it comes to a comfortable situation when a child is sitting or lying in a buggy, the new data will give us a good basis for decisions when it comes to the definition and dimension of the body supporting parts of a buggy in the area of the legs, for example, as you see. Weight will be in a question when it comes to the dimension of the material we use in the products. Next, please. You're not allowed to work with children when you go into comparative product testing, and the situation of a child in connection at an interface with a product is important, but it's also important for the adults in this situation when using such a product, how it works, how good it can be fitted and adopted to the shape and to the weight and to the proportions of the child of children using the products. Next, please. No, this was the former one. Yes. Another example where it's from where we meet with adults, for example, is when we have a comparative product testing when it comes to child carriers and child carrying system. So as you see, there are different ways to define the dimensions for such a carrier, and it's of extreme importance when it comes to safety. That on the one side, the usability from the point of view of an adult user is safe and comfortable, and on the other side, the situation of the child is well adopted and is safe, so that the child cannot open, for example, the locks for the belts. Next, please. So what we want to show with this special project is that our guidelines for the correct applications of anthropometric and strength data will lead several and even more industries than we have maybe asked, and consumers to suitable decisions facing the actual physical changes in the population. And we have specialists who will write in these guidelines how the actual situation is, but how we in what extent we will expect changes in the next years or in the next decades. This will improve the market chances and will of well-adopted products and procedures when it comes to European child products. And one final remark. These projects show that standardization is a prominent example for a direct transfer of scientific results into society and economy. Thank you for your